Okay, good afternoon again, folks, and welcome to today's webinar we're doing here for Mailers Hub and for MFSA. And today's topic is going to be cybersecurity, something of concern to all of us. Today's presenter is going to be from, whoops, I just lost the screen. There we go. From Watchguard, Sean Dawley. Sean has a deep history within the IT industry and has held many different roles within some of the largest and most impactful companies concerning industry standards. He started his IT career selling HIS, business Wi-Fi, and VoIP with Comcast in the Southwest region. Over the course of the next 10 years, Sean spent time with HP as a sales engineer, managing small partners in Texas, as a sales engineer for their high-end graphic-intensive workstations. He worked at Cisco Systems, where he held 3 different roles, including managing a large international partner and building out a technical solutions offering. Then he was off to Mojo Networks, where he ran the North America channel program before Arista acquired Mojo in late 2018. Then Sean moved to PCM, a $3 billion publicly traded IT seller, as a senior director and ran their $500 million a year Cisco network practice. Then, of course, PCM was acquired. He seems to be causing acquisitions. In August 20, then Sean moved to joined the Watchguard team as their territory channel account manager covering the South Central U.S. Sean is based in Albuquerque, has twin 9-year-old sons, and is an avid golfer and a martial artist, undoubtedly a required ability if you have 2 9-year-old boys. So with that, I'd like to, now just for everyone on the line here today, of course, you have a copy of the handouts. You can see it's in your little handout box there. It's a PDF. You can download that. And if you have any questions in the course of today's presentation, just enter them into the question box, and I will do my best to read those and pass them along to Sean to answer as time allows. Okay, so with that, I think, Sean, take it over.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the nice introduction. I will say quickly that whenever I am introduced and people give my background, I feel older and older because it's like 4 years here, 4 years there. And then you add in, I think you're right, I cause acquisitions. I don't know if that's a good thing, but I've been through 2, so very interesting stuff. First of all, thank you everyone for joining us today. Cybersecurity is obviously a very important, you can go to the next one. You covered all that. We don't need to recap yeah, there you go. Let's go to slide, there you go, let's start here. So first of all, I want to say thank you for everyone for joining today. Cybersecurity is always relevant with all of our partners, regardless of how we, present it. And this isn't always just enterprise. I think one of the biggest things out there that we have a misconception by is, enterprise companies or the federal government are always the ones that need to be mostly worried about cybersecurity. And in the reality of life, that's not true. The bad actors, the hackers, the people who do ransomware, they find it a lot easier to go after SMBs and mid-sized companies. So this conversation should be very relevant to everyone on this call. There's an old adage that there are either companies that have been attacked and been compromised, or there are companies that don't know it yet. Is that always true? Probably not, but it's probably 95% true. This is basically because, again, a lot of people don't know what they don't know. Add this to the regulations, compliance, needs, and more. Ensuring that your security should be your #1 priority is topic of mind for everyone and every leader within every organization. So no matter what industry you're in or how large your organization is, this needs to be a conversation that needs to be brought up, whether it's on a QBR, board meetings, or even with your IT infrastructure internal teams. You want to go to the next slide for me?
Sure. Oops, I'm insistent on going back to the first one. There you go.
It's all right. We all like going back to the beginning. So cyber criminals target SMBs. Well, why? Well, 65%, according to NSBA in 2019, 62% of all small business owners were very concerned that their businesses could be vulnerable to a cyber attack. Add to this, most SMB or mid-sized companies do not have full-time CISOs. For those who don't know what that is a Chief Information Security Officer, or they don't have the resources to fund a full team of cybersecurity professionals. And the bad guys know this. So if they know that you're going unprotected, it's easy hunting at that point. Next slide, please. And you can go one more. There we go. And one more for me. So the 5 reasons hackers, there you go. One more. Forward. You keep going backwards. Go forward one more. There you go. 5 reasons hackers target SMBs. You can click again for me. You can build out this slide. Perfect. So SMBs are the weak link. As I mentioned, they're less protected. It's low-hanging fruit. This isn't that SMBs aren't aware that they need to be cyber aware or cautious. Perfect. You can stop there. It isn't that small businesses aren't concerned. Again, it comes down to the financials, the team members, and the time to put into actually securing your network. Second, SMBs and mid-market companies, in the chain of trust, cyber criminals use these companies to get the larger victims. Now, I know many might be wondering how that's possible, but when you're dealing with compliance, you're dealing with data from either larger companies you are selling to through advertisement, or you're dealing with data from smaller end users that are individuals, whether it's HIPAA compliance or PCI or whatever it may be. Hackers would love to get into your organization, not only to wreak havoc on you and gain their money through a ransomware or phishing or whatever it may be, but they want to get the information that you know. This could be proprietary information, which there are state organizations that do this all the time. There are other cyber criminals that really just want the PCI information. They want the credit card. They want the information so they can steal from credit card companies. So when you talk about protecting your cybersecurity and your network, it's not just your data, it's your customers' data. And hackers know this. Thirdly, hackers draw less attention. As I mentioned, quickly, we can talk about it. There was a pipeline recently in the East Coast that got hacked. It was a ransomware. There is no proof, but supposedly they paid a $5 million ransom to get unlocked, and it took about 9 days. Well, that gained international news, right? I mean, we all know where those people were located at. We have an idea of who was behind it. But when they go after a small, medium business, that never really makes the national news. It might make news locally if it's told right, but I think it's 90% of all attacks on SMBs never go noticed within the media or garner any attention. Lastly, SMBs have valuable data. I'll give an example here. I know it's not with mailers, but it's an example. Manufacturers are the most vulnerable companies out there. There again, as I mentioned, there are countries out there that are bad actors, and they like to take proprietary information. Well, a lot of manufacturing companies here in the United States focus and put all their money into new manufacturing gear, whether it's a 7-axis machine or it's a CNC machine. And when you talk to them and you ask them about their cybersecurity, their answer is, well, we put all of our CapEx into what makes us money, generating revenue. And I totally understand that thought, but they're leaving their valuable data, their the stuff that makes them special, vulnerable to hackers. And once that's taken, it's out to the masses, and they're no longer as special as they should have been. Lastly, is optimistic attacks still exist? This is one of those things where it isn't just focused on SMBs or enterprise. Ransomware, and there are bad actors and organizations that literally flood everyone. It's called net phishing. They throw out a large net, they pull it in, and they want to see what they can catch. So these are the main reasons why they go after SMBs, and why it's more relevant for mid-sized companies to take this more seriously. You want to go to the next slide for me, please? Can you go to the next slide? We're going to go back. Yep, there we go. Okay, perfect. So, forward one. One more. There you go, right there. So a lot of this is what I mentioned in the beginning is when we deal with small and mid-sized companies, we've noticed most of them have a very thin IT team. They have an IT director that is not only in an office, but they're hands-on, whether they're imaging laptops and desktops or they're taking calls to help troubleshoot internal personnel. But they're overwhelmed. This is just the new reality. We've got more and more on their plates, and they've got to take on more and more responsibilities. So as you can see here, when we look at, the reasons why Smbs and any market are allowing this to happen, and it's nothing personal, it's just, again, funded, right? It's where do you put your dollars and what is most important. So this is where later, if people have questions, we can talk about working with an MSP partner, a managed service provider, can be helpful because they can take a lot of that off of your plate as a monthly charge, which would be OpEx instead of CapEx. But if we just look at the percentages there, the current IT teams are reporting that 74% of their issues are VPN. Now, I know on this call, many people might not be working remotely. So this is an overall cast. It isn't just based on people that are working in an office. But the other ones are very important, right? Video conferencing has been the #1 fastest growing industry besides cybersecurity in the past 19 months. When COVID hit, we all realized that for years we heard video conferencing, we're not going to travel, we're going to be on Zoom all the time, and it never really happened. When COVID hit, that really made that change, and then we realized how important video conferencing was. In hindsight, I don't think we were all prepared on how to use it, how to leverage it, how to troubleshoot it. And that pushed more pressure onto our IT teams to train personnel that should have already been up the standards on those. Bandwidth constraints. If we were on video, I would ask to show hands, but anyone here during COVID that worked from home and has kids knows that during school day, your video was degraded, your audio was degraded, and your kids would complain about not being able to be on school, without having issues on their Zoom. Bandwidth really, was a major issue. And again, a lot of people working from home would call their IT team and try to figure out why. The last of them that I wanted to highlight, the two that are most important are the password resets and the new hardware requests. The reason why is the password request is something that we're all guilty of. Companies feel that if we force out a mandate that says every 3 months you've got to change your password to 11, digits or letters, 4 have to be capital, 3 have to be lowercase, there has to be a number as a special digit, and we do that every 3 months, people tend to forget what their password is. And again, that just puts more time on your IT teams to correct that. And then lastly, the new hardware requests. This is important because everyone has to image hardware, whether it's on premises, a desktop, a laptop, an iPad. And if imaging is not done correct, it opens the door for hacking it down the road because there's no endpoint protection. All right, next slide, please. There we go. So this one is just a little bit more, how do companies 50 to 150 employees kind of are having their struggles? I don't need to read the bullet points, but basically the average cost of a breach is $3.79 million. And this is per 2015 reporting. So obviously that number's probably gone up. So, and that is on businesses of 50 to 150 employees. So I'm not sure how many businesses of that size are easily consuming a breach cost of $3.79 million, but that's going to hurt anyone. And again, that's why it's more important to be on top of this. 23% of businesses saw a major increase since 2013 in attacks and phishing. And the average cost per stolen record is about $154. So by stolen record, I mean whether it's a PCI, it's a credit card information, or if it's just a name and address, on average to repair that, to make contact, let the people know, to go out and get the service that will protect them for 6 months, it's about $154 on average per stolen record, and that is on top of the damage of the 3.79 million average. So this is a very costly issue. And again, when I go back to the beginning of the old adage, there's companies that have been compromised and they know it, and there's companies that have been compromised and they don't know it. This is a very frightening number, and it should be an eye-opening for everyone. Next slide, please. So I'm going to the slide before, but you can leave it here. please don't change it. In every vertical, there are compliance, right? So one of the things I wanted to make sure that everyone is aware of about compliance is compliance, when it's regulated down from the federal government, is the minimum standard. That is not what is highly recommended. That is not what is suggested, and that is not what is going to keep you purely safe. That is the minimum standard to be compliant in order to keep your records, or your business secure or within line. The way that we should look at this is it's kind of like buying a car. The federal law says that a seatbelt has to be in every car, and it's for your safety, and totally makes sense. But would you go out and buy a car that only had a seatbelt right now, or would you buy a car that had airbags? Because again, the minimum standard was seatbelt. Now we've got airbags, right? So just because something says this is the minimum standard doesn't mean that we should stop there. We should always look ahead. And lastly, when we look at compliance, the thing that we should realize is when the federal government says we've got a new compliance regulation, that is in place and suggested after a breach had happened. They realized what type of virus or phishing environment or malware or ransomware there was, and then they figure out a solution to fix that. Well, that can take 3 to 12 months. So by the time that 3 and 12 months, the government or other agencies have figured out what the new compliance minimum should be to fix that issue that was a year ago, hackers have already grown exponentially, and we're playing catch up. So again, being compliant within regulation is extremely important for your business. But again, that is the minimum standard, and looking forward and being ahead of the curve is always suggested much more than just relying on the very mere standards. Next slide, please. There you go, perfect. So what's new? Credential hacks are, always the best way for a hacker to get in. So let's look at a few ways to do this. So there's password spraying. Basically, I know it sounds bizarre, but on the dark web, actors can buy a bulk of passwords and log in usernames, and they can use them on multiple things. An example is Facebook had a major hack, and I think it was something like 300 million people's username and passwords were leaked. Those were then put on the dark web, and companies were able to bid on that and buy those. I know you might think, well, that was my Facebook account, but I guarantee you a lot of your employees are using the same password for Facebook that they're using for internal stuff. So now these actors know, okay, I've got a name, I can, I have their password, I can now start logging in as them at work if I use their email address. This is an extremely common path, but it's called password spraying, and they will just try to boil the ocean, hit as many as they can, and whatever hits, they would move forward. Credential stuffing. Again, so leaked passwords. So there's common passwords, there's leaked passwords. Very similar. This is when they actually get leaked passwords from a company. So it isn't like from Facebook, it actually comes from an organization, and somehow they get passwords through an IT breach, and they get the entire company organization's passwords, and they're able to then log in as the CEO because they have their password. These are very hard to find and to track because your network and your security only knows that there is a login username and there is a password associated with that. They don't know where it's coming from. They don't know whose actually fingers are typing it in, and they can't see me. So according to the network and security, once I put in the right data, I have full access to the information. And again, there's other ways to stop that, but that's why they like to get in. The last one is, the last three, Mimikatz. Mimikatz is a very interesting one. This is a software that you can actually buy on the dark web, and it allows one to steal credentials after gaining access to the first level of your network. Basically, you log in as a basic user, you don't have any access, but you sit there, and as other people log in, you get to see what they're using in real time, and then you copy their password and log in as them. Trojan Horses, many of us may have heard about those. Basically, it's a virus. It gets to go in, and it sits there for a while, sometimes upwards to 2 or 3 years before they activate it, and it just sits there and collects data. And it's almost invisible. Most people don't see it, And then 3 years later, after they've gained as much knowledge as they want, they take it, and then they shut down your system. And lastly is the old school. Ironically, yesterday I had to help my mom with her cell phone, and she had a SIM card. So I thought I hadn't seen one in years. I saw one yesterday, but there is the old school SIM card swapping that is very rarely used now, but it is still something that happens. Okay, next slide, please. Phishing. So spear phishing is if you haven't heard the term, this is the #1 way hackers gain access into any network and they get their data. They blast out emails that look like they are legit, they are internal, and they're asking for information. There have been some cases, I forgot the company, but there was somebody who worked in accounting for a fairly large corporation, I would say about $2 billion, and they were on the weekend and they got an email, and it was from their CEO. And the CEO basically said, hey, I'm overseas in this meeting. I closed a big deal. I need to get X amount of dollars transferred over to here right away. And they did. And they sent something about $2.5 million. And on Monday, they realized the CEO was not overseas. The CEO didn't send that. And the money was already gone and it was already too late to get it back. If the person who had read that email actually looked at the email address, even though it had the CEO's name, would have realized that it came from a very fictitious, weird-looking address, and should have realized that it was a phishing event. They didn't, and they lost about $2.5 million. So this is a great way for hackers to get in. And there are companies out there like KnowBe4, and there's a few other ones, that help your companies learn how to deal with phishing, how to read emails, how to read the website address, what it means, and how to spot these. But with phishing, phishing is not a cybersecurity hardware or software issue. This is mostly an employee training issue. Yes, there are firewalls that can help block some of this, and yes, there's some ways that we can work on that, but there's always going to be a way for them to get through to the email address. So it's all about educating your employees. Next slide. So why is spear phishing so successful? As I mentioned, it's just basic numbers, and it's growing every day. Again, I already mentioned the pipeline on the East Coast, but apparently that's where the breach happened. And it cost millions of dollars, apparently $5 million in a ransomware. It took over 9 days to correct, and it caused havoc all over the East Coast and country. So when you look at, the numbers, I think if you hit next one more time, it won't change slides, but it'll pull something up. 88% of organizations experienced spear phishing in 2019. So if you think about that, that was pre-COVID, and 88% of all organizations in the United States experienced some sort of spear phishing. I guarantee you in 2020, when we were working from home, or some people were working from home, that number is probably closer to 95%. So again, if you haven't seen it, good for you. But hopefully your employees have caught it and not opened up the email that is full of viruses, and that's why it's more important to train your teams. Next slide, please. And hit it one more time. There you go. And then 65% of attack groups initiate attacks with spear phishing. So, oh no, you're fine there. So again, this is their main way of attacking, to get information. 53% of IT reported increased phishing posts, which we've already talked about. And then lastly, 37.9%, it's more like 40, of untrained employees fail phishing tests. And this is something that we do internally with our company. We'll send out, I won't, but somebody will send out phishing emails as a test. And then if you open it up and you fail, then you've got to take an hour-long class to learn about why you failed and what to look for. Is it annoying to some people? Absolutely. But if they didn't open up the email and fail the test, then they wouldn't have to do that. And ultimately, the employees are the very last line of cybersecurity. So it's so important to make sure that they're trained up. Let's go to the next slide. You can leave it there for a second. So how do we predict the future? Well, there is no glass ball that gives us, the answers that we need. But many cybersecurity companies hire hackers, and I know it might sound weird, but if anyone remembers that movie, Catch Me If You Can, He wrote bad checks and he did scammed a bunch of people. He got arrested. The FBI, he was in jail, but afterwards the FBI hired him. And the reason why they did is he did such a good job of scamming people and learned how to work the system that they needed to leverage him to now stop other people. So what companies like Watchguard and other cybersecurity companies do is we hire hackers to help us with what is new, what is possible, what's coming down the road. How do we defeat that threat before it impacts any of our clients? And as well, they are tried and true policies that will always help. So let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about that. So what we do at Watchguard, and I'm only going to do a few product placements, but this is not really for product. Watchguard allows anyone at any time to look into our discover the 2021 predictions in depth and beyond. And these are not product placement around Watchguard. These are not sales. These are not we're going to push our product on you. This is held by our CTO, Corey, and his team of Threat Lab personnel. And they put these together. There's several videos, and they walk through their predictions. So as I mentioned, we've got hackers that work for us. We've got a team that works on threat defense. And then they put these videos together for companies like yourselves to go in and just spend 20 minutes and learn about what we're seeing, what's new, what's coming down the line, and even what we feel might be next year's biggest thing. So these are at no cost. They're available to everyone. I will send out information on where you can find these. And I guarantee you when you watch these, there's no product placement. We're not going to sell you anything. It's more or less for your IT team to learn more about what they should be prepared for in the future. Let's go to the next slide, please. And there it is, watchguard.com predictions. I will show you again later. You're fine. So let me go to my next slide, okay? Here's the one thing that's always important. So we've talked about phishing, we've talked about malware, we've talked about Trojan horses. And yes, cybersecurity is always evolving, and we're trying to stop whatever we can. And I'll talk about the numbers and the teams that do that. But the one thing that is always important is a layered defense. No matter what happens, that still wins. So I'm ex-Army, so I like to use military analogies here. But a layered defense always works, right? So physical defense is at your location. That's a key fob to get in and out of your building. Another key fob to get into your secure data center or wherever your secure files are. Security, physical security is always the very front line. And that also means that you need to train your personnel to spot somebody if they're in the wrong place and don't have a badge, to confront them and then make sure they escort them out of the location and bring them back to the front desk. The second layer is going to be your laptops and desktops. So that tank armor, that's going to be your laptops and desktops, and that's with the strong passwords that I mentioned, right? So it's 11 characters with capital and lowercase and numbers and special, everything else. So that's the next layer. Is you hope that your people are putting in a strong password so not anyone can log in and just take over the access to your internal information. The next one is going to be multi-factor authorization. So the glass can be that bulletproof glass. This allows access, secure access to your VPN, your secure data, and to applications. And I'll dive into more about what MFA is and why it's important. But quick note, from the White House, they mandated after that cyber attack on the pipeline that all government agencies must have an MFA in place by the end of 2022 to ensure that is in compliance and they are more secure. Then we've got the next one, which is going to be the endpoint protection. Endpoint protection, many of us might have it. It's antivirus on your laptop or desktops. It's that anti-malware that's on your laptop and desktop. So just because you've stopped somebody from using your laptop, that's great. Or just because you stopped somebody from walking around facility, great. Just because you stopped somebody from getting access to your VPN, awesome. But if somebody hacked your actual laptop and desktop, whether it's through an email that you used on a personal email address and you brought it onto your laptop, that can be like that Trojan horse and sit there for a while until it finds a way into your system. So again, if you add these all together, it's all about that layered defense and why it's important to not overlook any of them and to make sure all of them are up to date and working together. Next slide, please.
Hey, Sean, I got a question before you go further. For spear phishing, is the problem the opening of the email or clicking on an attachment that'll cause the problem?
It is. That is a very good question. So opening the email is not going to cause the issue. It is always the attachment or the reply. If you open the email, I mean, I suggest you don't do that. But the damage comes when it says, click here to give me the information I'm asking for. And a lot of times in a phishing email, it'll say, hey, this is so-and-so in IT. We are refreshing the network. I need you to click here to download the newest software of Java or whatever we might be using. And a lot of employees think that there is a nick in IT and this seems legit, so they click on it, and that's what causes the issue.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Next slide. And by the way, that's a great question. So this is a very important conversation. There are two trains of thoughts here with all customers, even enterprise. So covering the gamut from SMB to mid-market to mid-enterprise to full-size enterprise. There is either a single vendor thought process or a multiple vendor. Now, when I say single vendor means 75% of your stuff is bought through one manufacturer. The rest is kind of ancillary. Multiple vendor environments is completely different. So the thought process of this is, with single, this allows organizations to gain better control of their environment. It allows their internal IT teams to learn, understand, consume, and work with only one main vendor or a single dashboard or a single process that they can learn and master. It offers the ability for customers to pay less because they are bundling, and I'm doing air quotes here, like your insurance. You're bringing multiple services and solutions together. And the last part is it's easier for a company to maintain a relationship with one vendor, major vendor, and build out a roadmap together to make sure that they're secure. The other thought process, and this tends to be more of a SMB and mid-market focus, is the multi-vendor environments. And this happens when IT says we need Wi-Fi access points. And then they tell procurement, and procurement goes out and finds the cheapest one that they can find. They buy it, they give it to IT, and IT is like, okay, this is what I have, and they install it. Then IT goes back and says, I now need antivirus, and procurement goes out and buys the cheapest one they have, or whatever it might be. And eventually, your cybersecurity portfolio internally has 20 different manufacturers. And if anyone here has ever, played the game Babel or the telephone game, all of these companies may work together, but they were never designed to work perfectly with each other because they're competitors. So there's firmware updates, there's different dashboards you have to work with. So when you're on a multi-vendor environment, your IT staff, again, that is already thin, now needs to learn upwards to 5 or 6 different manufacturers, their dashboards, all the firmwares, how to make those work. And now we've just added probably another 10 hours a week of needed time on their side that they just don't have. So these are two different thoughts. I'm not going to say one is right, one is wrong, but one is definitely an easier path, and it allows you to be more secure, knowing that everything was built to work together. Next slide, please. Secure Wi-Fi. This is something I'm very passionate about. Going back to my Mojo network days, many people know that they have Wi-Fi in their environment. It's in your building. It could be in your lobby for your guests, whatever it may be. But most people never think about their Wi-Fi because it's out of sight, out of mind. It's wireless, so there's an access point on the ceiling. You don't look up. You just know it magically works, and there's Wi-Fi. That's great, but there's a big difference between Wi-Fi and secure Wi-Fi, and that's what we're going to talk about here in the next slide. Perfect. So hackers don't always play one game, right? Hackers like to play in the entire casino. So we've talked about phishing, we've talked about malware, Trojan Horses, we've talked about all of those things. One of the ones that most people aren't aware of is attacking unsecure Wi-Fi. And here's just a few ways that this happens. Hackers can literally sit in your parking garage and see that you've got a Wi-Fi. Okay, even if you have a password on it and it's protected, they can actually ghost off of that. And what I mean by that is they can create another network with the exact same name. It's called a pineapple. They put it in their car, and it's an access point. And it's labeled the exact same name that you use for your internal, and they wait for an employee to log in, and as thinking that's the right company access point, they log in and then they steal all of their information. Once they steal their information, they now go to your access points and Wi-Fi, log in, and then they have free range to whatever data they want. The two other ones that are mostly relevant here, and I've told the story 1,000 times, is the ad hoc. I have worked with many organizations where Wi-Fi signal wasn't very strong. There was an executive where his office was in the back and there was a lot of walls around it, and he was upset about, or she was upset about, the Wi-Fi strength that they had. So instead of dealing with IT, they go out and buy their own access point from a store, whatever brand they want. There's an outlet and they literally plug it in. That literally just opened up the entire network to everyone because you've just opened up an unsecured Wi-Fi access point to the entire environment. And that happens a lot more than you think. The other two is going to be the neighbor AP and the misconfigured AP. The neighbor AP is another one where in a large building or in a strip mall, or even if locations are close, I'm sure when you log into your system, you can see your neighbor, or even at your house, I can see my neighbors, right? And if somebody doesn't have their Wi-Fi secured with a password, your neighbor is able to get into your location. And the last one is misconfigured, and this is the most common and the biggest issue that we face is, again, going back to thin IT teams, or undertrained or underprepared or just overworked. The APs tend to be misconfigured, which then allows for a lot of errors and for the bad people to come in and take advantage. So these are just some of the ways that this happens, and it happens a lot more. There is a way to fix this, and it's called WIPS. WIPS is Wireless Intrusion Prevention Security. I know it's a tongue twister, but basically what it is a system within your environment, and you say, these are my access points, and these are the people that are allowed to be in my access points, and then it just locks it down. If anyone else, if any other AP tries to show up and be a part of that environment, it shuts it down. If your neighbor has an AP and they're trying to get in, it'll shut down that AP. If somebody tries to log in and they're not supposed to be there, it'll shut them down. So again, there's Wi-Fi and then there's secure Wi-Fi, and it's the wireless intrusion prevention that makes that secure. And there's only a few manufacturers out there that actually offer that. Next slide, please. So the ignorance is bliss, and I touched on it. If somebody's in a parking lot and they have a pineapple, and one of your employees, came in and they have their phone and like, oh, the Wi-Fi, it's asked me to, continue because they cannot verify the identity of the server. You know what they do? They just hit OK. Like, they just hit continue and they move on, and that just opens everything up. So it is the same thing in an airport. For those who travel a lot, you might see this come up on your phone saying, cannot connect with the server identity. And I'm as guilty as everyone. Pre-COVID, I was on 100 flights a year, and there were times where I hit continue. So I know I was a bad boy and I should be punished for it. But 92% of people hit continue. So as I mentioned earlier, employees are the best and last line of defense to make sure that you're secure. So the education piece is important. In this case, those 92% of people should have hit cancel and then made sure that they were on the right Wi-Fi and then go on from there. So this is something that happens everywhere to everyone. And I hope everyone here, and I can't see it, would probably put your hand up as well and say, I've done it myself. So let's go ahead into the next slide. There you go. Perfect. Sorry, I need to get a quick little sip there. Multi-factor authorization. This is something that I mentioned earlier that the White House put on an executive order for all government agencies. And it's something that a lot of enterprise companies have been using for a while, especially when you've got workers that are on flights, they're traveling, they're working from home. but it's becoming more relevant for people that are even in an office. MFA is, one of those things where it will be a compliance request down the road. As I mentioned, the federal government did it to themselves first. So if you're PCI and if you're SOC or whatever your compliance regulation may be, this will be something I guarantee you within the 12 to 18 months will be regulated and asked upon. Let's go to the next slide. So the thing about MFA is this. We all have our laptops and desktops, and it asks you for your your ID and then or your username, and then you type in your password, and then you're in the system. What MFA does is after I've done that and you're in your system, MFA then says, okay, you want to gain access to Windows, the Windows server, or if you want to gain access to Salesforce.com, or you can allocate whatever applications you want into a bucket and say, okay, if you want access to that information, we need to do the following. And what it does is it's you type in your password again, and it sends a signal to your phone, like it shows there, and it says, are you trying to log in? And if you are, you hit approve. What this also allows, if somebody's trying to log in as you on another server, somebody stole your credentials, and you're not trying to log in, you would get this notification and somebody saying, are you trying to log in? Well, let's say you're on vacation in Cancun, you're not trying to log in, well, you hit deny. So once you hit deny, whoever was trying to log in as you has no right to do that, and now you know that you have to change your password right away. So how does MFA do this? Well, they leverage something you know, something you have, and something you are. So in this case, right, you know your password or your PIN number. Something you have is your token, and I'm sure many of you have back in the day used those tokens you put in your USB card, it generated a number. So either a token, or everyone has a mobile phone now, and that's never outside of your reach. And then something you are, your fingerprint, your face, whatever it may be. They leverage those three things to make sure that you are the right person that is logging in. And when you add that on top of the other security features that you have in place, this really locks down any chance of anyone logging in ever after having a password stolen. So let's go to the next slide.
Hey, Sean, can I ask you a question before we go on? Somebody was asking about how to, what's the best way to train employees on cybersecurity? Where do you go to get good training materials, especially regarding the risks that come from spear phishing and using public Wi-Fi?
Yeah, no, so that's great. So there are organizations out there. One, the team I work with at Watchguard, we definitely help around secure Wi-Fi. That's a conversation we do all the day. But when it comes to phishing, there are companies out there. The one I recommend, it's called KnowBe4. And all they do is they are a phishing training company. That's all they do. And they come in, they hold trainings. They've got links they can put in internal trainings. And they will also test your employees by randomly sending emails to see if they fall for the phish attacks. And if they do, they'll put them back through training. So KnowBe4 is probably the best organization out there to leverage for the phishing attack and training of your employees. Cost-wise, I don't know what that is, but when you get my information at the end, I know people that work over there, and I'll be happy to do an introduction and make sure you get the right contact information.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Credential attacks. This is the absolute best way for a hacker to gain access into your data. I talked about it earlier. The network does not know what it doesn't know. So if I say I'm username X and this is my password and they match, it's going to let me in, regardless if it's really me, not me. If I have my sister do it or somebody else do it, those two pieces of information will let me in. So again, this is why the MFA, which then goes to your phone, really separates the difference. So once you do this portion, you use your username and login, you hit OK, then a signal is sent off to something I have, my phone, and then I have to verify it. So this again stops those secondary credential hacks, which is the easiest way for hackers to gain information, because again, if they log in correctly, no one knows they're there because they're logged in as Joe Smith, who has full access to the information. Next slide, please. So why is it important? Well, there are more than 15 billion credentials circulating and cyber criminal underground. So we had talked about the 300 million credentials that Facebook lost, or we talk about the Target breach that cost a few C-level people their positions, $75 million, and I believe it was right around 500 million people were affected. Those are just two large corporations. Right now, on average, there's more than 15 billion credentials circulating on the black market. So, that's the chances of everyone on this call having either their MSN information or their Gmail information or whatever email address you use, there's a really good chance that you have had your information taken and it's out there. Even if you're on LinkedIn, they had a breach. That's why it's more important to always change your email, your passwords, or even get a password generator that makes it even more difficult. In 2020, stolen and exposed credentials rose 300% compared to 2018. A lot of this was due to COVID and people working from home and not being as careful as they should be. Again, when you're at home, you're most likely on an unsecured Wi-Fi environment, or you're being careless and you open up emails on your personal email address that's on your laptop, and they think, oh, well, it's personal email on a different system. It's still on the same laptop. And once it's in your system, it's in your system. And then we offer Watchguard's dark web scan is at no cost. Anyone here can use it. You can go onto our website, dark web scan. It's absolutely at no cost. And we will actually scan the dark web and look and see if any of your credentials have been stolen for your organization. If they have or have not, we will send you a report with that information so you can see what has been done, damage, and beyond. And then lastly, 29% of breaches involved were with stolen credentials. And we talked about how those are stolen. It's, whether people are lazy. There are people that I've seen actually write their password and put it on a piece of paper and tape it to their laptop. I'm sure people here have seen that. And then there's people that use the same password for everything. Whether it's their banking, their Facebook, LinkedIn, it's the same password. And once a hacker has that, they can just keep trying until they get in.
Hey, Sean.
Let's go to the next slide, please.
Sean, can I ask you a question about that? I think that the bane of people's existence nowadays is the login and password routine. So that if you have any kind of normal activity on the web, you're going to have dozens, if not, scores of passwords. So people, what is your thought on these password managers where you put all your passwords into something and it generates a single password you use? I mean, is there a strategy for the average person, whether it's business or personal, to manage the volume of passwords that they have to have?
That is an absolutely great question. So there's two things and two thoughts I have on that. One, most of those password generators come in a USB stick. And, they generate fantastically large, complex, passwords. But that's one more thing that you can lose. And that's, so once you lose that, you don't have any of your passwords. So the other type of password generator is actually one that you can download as an app. But again, if somebody breaks into your system, they've now gotten access into your password application, and then they can work around that. Do they work? Yes. I'm not the biggest believer in them. And for the next reason why, the next two slides, I will actually show you why I'm not the biggest believer in them. But they do work. I don't think they're worth the money. I think that if you lose your key fob with that generator on it, you're in worse shape than you began. So it's always a risk reward, but there are better ways to work around that, and that is the MFA. And I'll talk about that in the next two slides.
Thanks.
So again, as I mentioned, hackers don't break in, they log in. And this is what we were talking about with those passwords, right? And this is frightening. So let's go to one more slide, and I'll explain why the MFA is even more important. So this is just some common uses, right? And of course, you could add hundreds. When I log into our system, I think I've got over 70 different applications that I can only get access to through my MFA. So I only need now one password. And then I need my phone to say that, yes, I am logging in. But once I do, so I log in my computer, my username, I put my password in, and then I say, I want to go to Salesforce or Dropbox or Office 365, Bamboo, any of those. Well, there's a page, and it's called Authpoint. You click on that, and now it says, what's your username? You put in your username. It says, what's your password? You put in your password, and then it sends a message to your phone. It says, are you trying to log in? You hit yes, and then you get access to all of these and whatever you feel like putting in there. So when you say that, I've got all these different passwords for all these different applications, the easiest way to do that is on the right, it says SSO. And SSO is single sign-on. Basically, that means we leverage the MFA, the leverage something you have, something you are, something you know, to prove that it's you, and I only need one password to do that. So when we go back to, do I need a lot of complex passwords? I could. I would have to either remember them all or use a password generator and not lose the key fob or make sure nothing happens to it. Or I can use the MFA, multi-factor authorization, only have one password and verify that it's me by logging, pressing it's me on my phone. So single sign-on is the way that the future is, by getting away from those larger passwords that are complex and those password generators, by doing single sign-on. And this is something that companies like Cisco, HP, IBM, every Fortune 500 company is doing this. We do it internally, and it's not just meant for enterprise, it's meant for anyone. In fact, you can buy Authpoint licenses for 5 people. So that's the minimum that we sell them for. So if you have 5 employees, you can buy 5 licenses. So it isn't something that you have to spend a lot of money on, but it is something that makes it easy to manage, and it puts the onus on your employees to actually say yes or no, is that me or not me? Hopefully that answered the question from what you asked about what my thoughts are on multiple passwords. This is a whole lot easier. And then lastly, you can also see down below, it isn't just for cloud applications. You can use it for remote access, your VPNs. You can use it for your privileged user access, and mostly your compliance. So MFA is compliant with all regulations, and there is not one compliance organization does not allow or accept a multiple factor authorization to be allowed to manage access to it. So we can move to the next slide, please. Endpoint protection. I touched on this briefly. Endpoint protection is your phone, your laptop, your iPad, your tablet, your desktop. It's the very end of the network. And for those, I'm going to quickly say this, and I don't want to use my nerd hat here, but the network stretches from your phone to your laptop, to your desktop, to your access points, to your router, to your switch, to your firewall, down to your data center. So the network is extremely large and very vulnerable. So there's a lot of attack points. The easiest one is phishing, and phishing happens on your endpoint, right? I mean, I'm not opening up emails on my server. I'm opening emails on either my phone or my laptop and desktop. So let's take a look at what that looks like if you want to hit the next. Now, I know many here might not have remote working, and one caveat I would like to say is a lot of companies have told me in their past, well, we don't need this because we're behind the firewall and we don't have any remote workers. I'm like, okay, does your CEO have a laptop? And they're like, well, yeah. I'm like, does he take it traveling or she take it traveling? Yep. Do they go on planes? Yep. Do they stay at hotels? Yep. Then you have remote workers. Even if you're the owner of the company, I guarantee you're doing emails on your phone. You're doing emails on your tablet. You are working all the time. So remote workers doesn't always mean your entire staff. It could mean 1 or 2 people. And those are the ones that you still need to make sure are secure, especially if they are leadership and hackers know their names. They're going to be even more vulnerable. So the threat landscape looks like this. I don't know if anyone heard this, but Zoom had 200 million users that were facing a serious threat by using Zoom. And that happened in 2020. Zoom worked on it and it started to fix it, but video conferencing comes with a lot of security risks. It really does. And then you add into, again, the email, malware, and all those laptops, desktops, tablets, phones need to be protected that could actually spot the malware, and they can address the malware. and any executable action item would be scanned, either receiving or being sent, and it is scanned for viruses before it is then approved and sent out. So endpoint protection does a lot. It's the key is, one, it hopefully helps you from not opening up emails that are bad, even though some will still get through. But even if you're infected, it will scan the email that you're about to send internally, and if that is bad, it will quarantine that and it won't let you send it. So endpoint protection stops attacks from two fronts. Even if it may have affected your laptop, it'll stop you from taking your laptop and affecting others within it. And then as we see below, the malware attack frequency, right? Every hour, there's almost 5,000 malware attacks. Every day, 117,000. Every minute, 81. This is something that is ongoing every day, nonstop. It's never going away. And the only way to deal with it is find a way to stop it before it gets there. So let's look at the next slide.
Hey, Sean, you have a question here. So if you're the person who's who's using your laptop or your phone for work, and you go to hotels, is there a particular type of software that's commercially available that people should put on their laptops or phones to offer this kind of protection?
Absolutely. There's several manufacturers out there that offer an endpoint protection, and of course it really depends on your price point, your pain threshold, what exactly you're looking for. Some companies offer just malware, some offer just virusware, some offer a complete suite. But yeah, there are definitely companies out there that do this. I mean, obviously Watchguard is one of them. Sophos does this. There's a lot of companies out there that do this. And again, if you reach out to me, I'm more than happy to kind of send you a list of who does it. But this is something that, if you Google endpoint protection companies, you'll probably see a list of 30. And then of course it's just, finding out which one is best for you. But the cost is not that high. When you're talking, if let's say you buy 100 licenses, you're probably talking $16 a year per license. Now I know it's $16, but okay, so for $1,600, you protected 100 people for the year. So, and then if you only have a few people working out of their house, like a few leadership, then you can buy less and less of those licenses. So it isn't a very costly thing, but it's that layered defense. And this is that last piece of layered defense. But yes, there are definitely companies out there. And when you have my contact information, I'm more than happy to walk through where to look and kind of who to leverage.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. So the last part of this is always interesting. So malware has been around for 20-something years now, and it's not new. But what is amazing is with companies like Watchguard, and we all have our own cyber threat teams that analyze data. Every email that is sent through our EPP, we scan. We actually look at all of those before we approve or disapprove or quarantine. But we only know of 25% of all the malware that is actually created and being used. So we've created algorithms to find those, and we've created ways to stop them. But that means that 75% of malware is 0-day. And what that means is there's hackers out there that write code, and they woke up at 6:30 in the morning and they wrote a brand new version of a malware, and they're sending it out by 7:30 the same morning. So that gives everyone a very short window to catch, remediate, and quarantine. And working with a cybersecurity company, we have a team that does that, and that's why every executable item is scanned. Because if we only know of 25, we can catch those quickly, but we need to scan every email, every attachment, and we don't read what's in your emails. Let me just preference that. And we're not reading your files and then the data. We just look for the attachments that look like malware. So when we do that, we're looking for these 0-day. So we can catch the 25% easily. It's a 75% of 0-day that we're trying to catch. And a little brag point for my company is we have had 0 infractions since 2013 with every user that was actually running in lock mode. So if you run in the most secure mode, we have not had any breaches or issues since 2013. And I'm going to knock on wood since I said that, but we've done very successfully well with that. But that's part of the whole process of taking in all those files, reading the data, and making sure that there is not a 0-day malware that was written that morning and being sent out. Next slide, please. And I think this one you got to build. So let's hit it 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And while he's building, there you go. So while he's building this out, so again, when I say remote worker, it's not that your employees are working from home. This is just for those leaders, those individuals, your sellers, your field sales people, whatever it may be. These are the challenges that they face. And I'm glad somebody said hotels, because hotels are the most prominent place to get hacked. So when I travel all the time, I never use the Wi-Fi in a hotel. I always use my phone as my hotspot, because I can at least control who has access to my phone internet, and it makes it a little bit more secure. But everyone who's a remote worker, whether it's your phone, your laptop, your iPad, your tablet, desktop, whatever it may be, they are all facing these on a daily basis. We talked about phishing. Those are those emails that are going to try to get data from you to garnish access. Ransomware is something that's becoming more and more sophisticated, spreads very easily, and once it's in, you've locked down the entire system. We've talked about credential theft. This is, again, somebody has either bought the username and password and they're logging in as you. And then the last one, and this is where, again, education of the end users, and somebody asked that question, how do we educate? Happy clickers are everywhere. And I've been known to do it too. I've got employees that tell me to slow down sometimes, but we get an email, we read the body, and it says click here, and they click, and they didn't read the email address. They didn't look for any spelling mistakes or any warning signs that it was a bad email. Or they're on a website and it says click here for more information, and instead of being on a secure website, they were on a ghosted website that was unsecure. So happy clickers is the last one, especially being a remote worker. These are the 4 that we always try to educate on. And it's hard. The education piece is the hardest. The first 3, we've got software, we've got hardware, we've got things that can help with that. The happy clickers goes back to the education piece, and where IT can hold people accountable. Not that people have to get fired, but like I said, know before can kind of help in and kind of help them train not to be the happy clicker, which opens them up to cyber attacks. Let's go to the next slide. All right, here is my 2-minute pitch as to why my company. So hopefully we talked about this overall industry. We've talked about what's happening, the threats that everyone on this call, their companies are facing, the threats that my company is facing, I face on my own personal laptops. This is stuff that we all need to be aware of. But the next 2 slides are just going to be about why maybe you want to reach out to me and work with Watchguard. So next slide, I'm going to keep it real short and painless, I promise. As I mentioned about choosing a multi-vendor solution or a single vendor solution, there are a lot of companies out there that tend to boil the ocean. And I'm not picking at HP. I work there. I think they're a great company. But HP sells printers, workshops, access points, laptops, desktops, tablets. They sell servers. They sell everything, which is nice. But they're not a cybersecurity company. They're an IT hardware company. So when you deal with cybersecurity, you want to really start to focus on who does cybersecurity and only cybersecurity. So at Watchguard, we do network security. We do our multi-factor authorization. We have secure Wi-Fi, and we have endpoint security, and that's it. We don't get into the world of making servers. We don't make switches. We don't make racks for data centers. We don't make tablets. We only deal with cybersecurity, and all of these are on the same single glass of pane for management. They're on the same GUI. They are easy to use for your IT infrastructure. It is a one-stop shop to kind of solve all of your cybersecurity. Let's go to the next one. And as I mentioned, we are all over social media. And the stuff we post on social media, we've got several different YouTube channels. Those tend to be more geared towards what Watchguard is doing, why we are better, whatever it may be. But if you go to our LinkedIn, I've mentioned the daily security bites. That's Corey in the top left. He's our CTO. He also has a podcast, and we also have the Simplicity, and these are all about what is happening in the world of IT, world of cybersecurity, and they are not product placement videos. These are literally education pieces for people to know what's happening, what's new, and what is being addressed. The social media aspect, you're going to learn a lot more about our product, which I hope we have the chance to talk about one day. But we want to make sure that you have access to learn more about what threats are coming your way and how you can work with those, either if it's with Watchguard or with somebody else. And one more slide. So what I would like to do, this is just for everyone on the call, Watchguard does not sell direct to any customers. We don't care how big you are, it doesn't matter. We are only sold through the channel. So in my region, I've got 240 partners that sell my products. They range from national companies like Maryplex, that is a $1 billion company, down to a regional mom and pop shop that have 10 employees. The reason why we do this is because they're the ones that would most likely install the hardware. They would be your point of service. In a lot of cases, they would be your managed service provider. So they are the ones that actually, maintain our hardware and maintain our success as a cybersecurity company. But Maryplex and I talked about this presentation I was doing, and we wanted to make sure that anyone on this call, if they reached out to me, if they were interested in a no-cost cybersecurity evaluation, all they have to do is reach out to me, and I will team up with Maryplex, and they will do a 1 hour conversation, and then maybe even a risk assessment, no cost, and we can address whatever issues or needs or gaps in your coverage are there. It'll be a low sales push as I can make it. Obviously, we are in the selling motion, but this is more or less for you to see what is needed, what is missing, where your gaps are, and then of course, Maryplex sells all manufacturers. It isn't just Watchguard. So even if they feel that Watchguard wasn't the right solution, they'd be the right partner to help you with whatever that gap may be. So this is for everyone on the call. If you've got information, that's my information. You can either email me or call me, and I will start that next step with you. And I believe we're going to share this slide deck out as well, so you should have that sent to you later today. And that's it for me. Thank you for your time today. I think we've got a few minutes for questions here, if I'm not mistaken. Hopefully we got about another 10 minutes that we can do questions with. Is that correct?
I think we're actually just about on time here, but we have no more questions anyway, so that works out. So yeah, I think this has been very
perfect. So I want to say thank you well, good. And again, it is a lot to absorb in an hour. Each one of those topics, I could have done an hour on each one of those. So I welcome anyone on this call to reach out to me, even if you want to learn more about a certain topic, if you've got questions about even how do I find who works at KnowBe4, or do you have a contact? I'm here to help you in any way I can. So please, take my contact information. I try to respond within 35, 40 minutes to all calls and emails, and I look forward to working with all of you.
Okay. Well, Sean, thank you again, and thanks to the folks at Watchguard for letting you come on and talk to us today. I want to thank everybody who called in, of course, for their attendance, and I want to thank Michelle for helping out, keeping the lights on in the background. So with that, I think we're done for today. I look forward to having everybody back for our next Mailers Hub webinar next month. And until then, thanks again. Stay safe. We'll talk to you later. Bye.